Welcome to Flyover Conservative Podcast with David and Stacy Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
Why can I not become a British officer?
Because you are not British, George.
There must be a path.
There is not for you.
Go dig my grave, both wide and deep.
I sense a storm looming over the Ohio territories.
I could go there, survey it for you.
So you have ambition.
Since the Crown sent me to serve, I've yet to have a good experience with a colonist.
I look forward to changing your opinion.
Much of that territory is unexplored. It's wild, unpredictable, and dangerous. What are you called?
George Washington.
Whose fort is that?
It's the French. And land claimed by the British Crown.
Demand the French leave.
Who does own this land, if not the one who has the will to tame it? Tell your king we will never leave.
Then they will force you to leave.
Oh.
These are not the open battlefields to which you're accustomed.
I have fought in a great many battlefields.
Not in the New World, sir.
If you fail, I'll have a colonial to blame.
This is a direct order, and we will obey it! Fire!
It's not your fault, George.
Major Washington. You lost.
You started a war!
George, there's no fairness here.
That is not the way the world works!
Then someone should remake it!
Choose your path. Make it yours.
Forward!
And prove them wrong.
In theaters July 3rd. Celebrate America's 250th anniversary. Buy tickets now at angel.com/Washington.
Such a great movie.
Fight. Exciting.
We were there that day
time.
it came out.
It seems like we saw the trailer like a year ago.
I know.
And it was like, I don't even remember what I was watching, but I was like, I want to see
do
that.
it. Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
cancel whatever we came here. I want to see this. And then we waited all of this time for it to come out. It exceeded expectations.
Oh, it was
I love
excellent.
reading biographies and history. And there's so many aspects of Washington's life that I've seen brushed over, and you just kind of see the older Washington and a few, great quotes and things. And there's references of his youth, but to see it come to life, the events that shaped him and caused him to think a certain way and to strive a certain way, and the pressures of society, they're pressing him down, but he, used them as motivation to move forward. It's such a great story, such an American story of just, brave frontier, chopping down trees, making your own way of things, and fighting that class structure that they had seen so long in Europe. So excited about today's guest. He helped write the script for this play. He was a part of it from being just a little acorn going into the ground until it became the mighty oak tree we see in theaters today. Co-wrote it with John Irwin. He's a former journalist with the Hollywood Foreign Press. Has interviewed everyone from Clint Eastwood to Dolly Parton, Richard Gere, George Clooney, Tom Hanks, Chris Hemsworth, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Wow.
Like when it comes to actors in Hollywood, knowing who's who in the zoo, and then having an appreciation for film and being able to make this project come to place. Grew up in the Netherlands and has been a U.S. citizen now for some time. Came here in 2002, and I'm interested to see the perspective of seeing what Washington means to him. So excited to talk today to Mr. Diederik Hoogstraten.
Yay! Welcome.
What a great trailer!
What a pleasure to be here.
I bet you've seen it a lot of times. All the goosebumps still come, but we never get tired of watching it. And I can usually tell what I think of things, and my wife's the same way. But we both kind of tend to be evangelists when you come across a new restaurant. Like, oh, this was amazing. We'll text our friends and tell them about it. Sometimes you're at a theater. I don't know if I've been more evangelistic about a movie in a long time than this one. And it seems like the marketplace has been demanding something like this in a world where you're kind of given so much junk food. They come up with a Top Gun every now and again or something. People really like, oh, it was just a good movie. People were hungry for this, and it's just crushing it at the box office.
Yes. Well, thank you, guys. Sounds like your excitement and evangelism has probably helped, push up the box office numbers because the movie's doing very, very well.
Yes.
I think what you just said is right in the bullseye. I think, first of all, I think most of us still love America. It's just a basic assumption I have. And as a new American, as an immigrant who deeply loves this country, and we can talk about why. But I think I'm in the majority. I think most of us still do, despite what the media wants you to believe and what social media is telling you. And so when John Irwin, our brilliant director, decided to write a love letter to America, really, by telling the amazing origin story of George Washington, I think we kind of knew it would resonate. Like, if you tell great stories, true stories, the right way, and it's out of love for this country, and never to say, I always put in the disclaimer, we know this is not a perfect country. Believe me, I've lived in many different countries. This is the best one. It's not perfect, but it's the best one. And so if you write that love letter, if you pay homage to a great American, the first real American, you could argue, people will come. And I think, to your other point, I fully have seen that I think there is a hunger for shared experiences in America. And you can have that in church, you can have that in school, you can have that in all your book clubs and at work, of course. But I think the movie theater is such a uniquely American institution, if you will, a place where we get in there with strangers, with our popcorn in the dark, and then be overwhelmed, if you're lucky, by a good, great movie, by a powerful story that, again, your neighbor to your left or right, you might not agree on much. Who knows? You might never know, actually. But you get to share that moment with them. And that's what John Irwin always wanted to do with this movie. A movie for everyone, regardless of your politics, your background, your identity, to be experienced on the big screen with big sound, big popcorn, with people you don't know. And we're so grateful, so incredibly grateful, people like yourselves and everybody who showed up to make this movie one of the biggest surprises, I guess, to Hollywood at least, of the summer so far.
You know what was so cool about this, Diederik, was in the movie theater. We were actually there with some friends, so we were sitting right beside him. But the theater was full, and at the end of the movie, everyone started clapping.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was so cool. There's not very many movies that you attend that the audience claps about the movie, and the whole place clapped. It was outstanding. In fact, I was sad when it was over.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it can't be over yet.
I wanted it to be like a next episode.
Yeah.
To see the next one immediately. It was
Thanks
so
for
good.
Sharing that. Yeah.
It is so grand. The costumes and the filming and the footage and the beauty of it just stands alone. And then the script. It's so efficient in how so much is said to keep the story moving so smoothly. And you immediately feel like you understand the characters and the family dynamics that are creating the people around them, and the political dynamics that are imposing their will on the characters and their decision making, and kind of a new understanding of Washington. How hard was it to make a script? I heard, I think it was John Irwin. He was on a podcast I watched with a bunch of historians. I think one of them contributed, and the rest were kind of critiquing what they thought of it, basically, and so he was an interesting hot seat for him to be in. And he used this phrase, and I thought it was so beautiful. He said, this is not a photograph, it's a painting, and that's kind of what you can do. What was it like creating the script that told enough to people understand, but not, bog it down in details where it moved as smoothly as it did?
Yeah. Well, John Irwin, I very often call him our brilliant filmmaker, and that's sort of in a general sense, that's true. If you've watched House of David that he made on Amazon, and Wonder Project on Amazon, or Jesus Revolution, or any of his other films, he clearly is a visionary filmmaker who, by the way, is one of the very few filmmakers who makes a lot of money for the studios he works for because he understands the audience. But a specific example of his brilliance is that this movie, and like most of his movie, he sees in his mind what it's going to be. When he engaged me and my fellow writer, Tom Provost, he told us in detail what he wanted to happen. And that's literally the movie that you guys have seen on the screen. And so there's not, I think, a lot of storytellers or artists generally who have that ability. What we did is Tom and I sat with John Irwin for days a few years back. We took notes and sort of downloaded the story from his brain into our computers, if you will. And then we went away to write the screenplay for this movie that you've seen. John always knew we were going to start it with a deeply traumatic moment for any kid, the death of his father. I'm not giving anything away. It's the beginning of the movie. 11 years old, he loses his father. And then the question, what do you do? How do you react? What happens next? He also knew we were going to end it at age 22, 23, when he finally has learned so much from his failure and his hardships and his disappointments that he's then able to lead the first colonial independent militia of its time in 1755. So those 11, 12 years in the middle, we knew what the story was. There is as John always says, George Washington's life was made for the movies. Mm-hmm. And it's a miracle that no one did it yet. But maybe God just was waiting for John Irwin and us to sort of take it on together and do it the right way without ever projecting our modern sensibilities onto the story. Yes. We always wanted to be truthful and authentic and real. And so that's to your question, John. Just if you want to see him as a painter, I love that image as well that he uses. We're not photographers, we're not historians. We are painters given an impression, impressionist painters give an impression of the reality as we imagine it. And he knew what he wanted to paint from day one. He shared it with us, and I feel very grateful, very blessed to be part of the team, because then ultimately, of course, you get producers, very beautiful, talented producers, actors, crew. I had the privilege of going to Ireland. It was shot in Virginia and in Ireland. I had the privilege of going to Ireland and see people work on our film. And it was, I can tell you more about it, but so just to say, it's a team of hundreds of people ultimately who bring this story to life, led by John Irwin and based on the script that we got to write.
So how did you get connected to the project?
Well, back then, I know we're talking about this a little bit beforehand. My wife, Kelly, is speaking of brilliance, she's a smart one in our family. She is the CEO of The Wonder Project. That's a new entertainment studio based in Austin and Los Angeles. She founded it with John Irwin back in 2022. So that takes some guts, you know. Yeah, there's not a lot of successful startups in Hollywood in recent decades. Netflix obviously is an obvious example, but that's where Kelly also, by the way, used to work. But so she started a successful studio that is for the faith and values audience, for us in the middle, right? And of course, you can be a viewer in Seattle and in New York and wherever you want to live. It's just that she always has believed and is proving every time they put something out that faith values is an audience. It's not a genre. It's an audience. It means most of us in America, frankly. And those are the people we make movies for. Kelly and John started the company, and House of David. So King David from the Bible and George Washington were going to be his two, speaking of ambition, his two big projects.
Wow.
John two obscure, mostly forgotten characters in history.
Yeah, why not? Take them on. And I often say the plan had been to go with Washington first, but then King David, for many reasons, had to come first. And I often think that George Washington would have approved if he knew that King David got preference over him initially. But so they started the company. They started talking about these big projects. And Kelly said, I think you need a writer by your side for Washington, and you should talk to my husband. That's basically what she did. She connected us. John and I hit it off and started talking, and that's when I brought my friend Tom in, who was a mentor of mine in screenwriting. Still lives in Los Angeles. I always say to Tom, he's from Texas. Like, Tom, we'll get you to Texas. I'm really sorry that you are stuck in LA, but he still lives there, and he and I got to do the writing with John that way.
There's been so much in our world that has been just tearing down the old. Anything that happened before 5 minutes ago is outdated. The founding fathers were out of touch, ignorant. You read the you read their writings and realize, they can conjugate in Latin I think we're probably devolving, more than evolving. But there's definitely been a vacuum of strong male characters. If there is a male character, usually they're the brunt of the joke or a doofus, or maybe things worked in spite of them. There's,
you just look at sitcoms, you look
TV
at
sitcoms, the Al Bundys of the world, and even movies. There's not a lot of even just heroes you could point to, and they kind of went to our genre where even heroes were like these flawed characters, and to have two men like David and Washington, not to even equate them, but to highlight these are the characteristics of great leaders, and to see them fail and succeed. Even Washington making the decision of like, well, then I'll do it for free if you won't pay me what I'm worth, and like having this drive of understanding value and integrity and doing what he said. Highlighting, you mentioned earlier, like America's the best country, but it's not perfect. It's as good or bad as we are. And so highlighting these characters that like every dad would want his son to have those in his DNA, and then to highlight them on the screen where you can kind of see it. And I think movies do that. You're like, oh, that was fantastic. It's why we like watching sports. Somebody, was injured and plays through it, or they dive out of bounds to get a ball. You're like, look at that hustle. That's we need to work our, we need to do everything like that. I guess I want to thank you for being a part of highlighting these men, and specifically, Washington here, in a way that young men can see this and have something to point to besides everything is bad and we got to tear it down and start over. Like, we have a lot of goodness in the history. We need to pull more from that and dilute the bad. Thank you for highlighting that.
What a beautiful monologue. I think you should write that down and publish it, because that seriously, that is such a very thoughtful response to what we try to do. And I hadn't really actually, some of these interviews are quick and forgettable, but this one I can tell is not that way, because you're making me think about some of the deeper layers of this story and this film that I really hadn't considered that much. I grew up in the Netherlands in the 1980s, a very progressive family, very feminine household. I would say my family was woke before woke was a word. And, I love my parents. My mom passed, but I love my dad dearly. But it was a different time. I often say Alex P. Keaton in Family Ties helped save me, because I did get to watch Family Ties on TV over in Holland on a little black and white TV. And that was the first time I saw a handsome, smart kid praise America, talk about Ronald Reagan in a different way. Like, made me realize, oh, there is a totally different way to look at family, at values, at faith, at politics, at America. And so, but to your point, it's important, I think, to look at great men and great women in history, look at them as they were, not as how we wish they'd been, not tearing them down. And that goes for statues as well as in the movies. Doesn't mean we have to glorify them necessarily, although in this case, it's not so bad to glorify and look up to George Washington. I will say that, I have a 5-year-old son, and what you just said just now, like seeing what young George has to go through and how he responds, what a terrific lesson for my little guy, Asher, and his sisters, Madison and Camille, to learn. It's funny, I've lately been looking at the way Washington was characterized later in life. I'll read you a few of he was described as grave, silent, thoughtful, you humble, of course, extremely courageous, all these words that when you meet him as a kid, no, he wasn't that way. He had to learn to be that way. And one of the things that we're trying to do early in the movie is, yes, we show all these crucibles that he has to face, that he has to go through, but we try to always the subtext is always that your worst day does not have to define you. You don't have to stay there. Now, if you're lucky, you have faith, you have family, you have community. But even when you feel deeply lost, as George does many times in our story, those are opportunities. Those failures, some of them are true failures, are opportunities to learn. As his mother says, I'm sure you remember this line, failure is a tutor sent by God. We made it up, but we think the sentiment is right coming from Mary, his mother. She was a tough woman. She was a widow, obviously. She was struggling. She was hard on him. But ultimately, she says, listen, God is trying to teach you something here. There's wisdom on the other side. But first, you have to listen. And hopefully, we convey that George Washington, as a young kid, struggling as he did, was able to listen, found it in himself, maybe was forced at times by people like his mother and his older brother Lawrence, to listen and to take those failures and develop the characteristics that we know him for, the resilience, the incredible resilience, the integrity that he shows when he resigns his commission, right? When he's failed on the battlefields. Ultimately, to learn what it means to serve others, to lead through service, if you will. And yes, these are messages that are great for kids, but I will always go back to John Irwin saying, we're in the business of mass entertainment, and we want to entertain the masses. If we can also put some lessons, some values in there, wonderful. First, we want to entertain them. And that does not mean close-up, gory, bloody violence. There is violence in this film. I need to warn all the parents out there because it was a violent time and his life was pretty violent. But we don't do HBO style close-ups of bloody wounds, nothing like that. Same for sex. There's none of it. There is a kiss because he doesn't get the girl, but he gets to kiss her. Thankfully, a little bit of Jane Austen, in the film. But anyway, I love that you commented and said, this is a story that as dads we want our sons to hear. That's a great compliment, and I think that's what John Irwin was going for, and I take that to heart myself.
There's another line in there I'd like to specifically ask you that just jumped out at me in watching it. There's kind of during the training montage, basically is what I would call it, where Lawrence is imparting wisdom to George, and he says something along the line of. And I'd like to see if you remember like putting this in there because it's so brilliant. He says, you can force obedience, but leadership requires people to want to follow you. They'll follow you because they respect you. You can threaten people to obey. Can you expand on that? Because that is just kind of thrown in there in the conversation between them as they're passing, in the city. But that seems to be something that in spite of maybe even strategical failures in battles, both in this movie and, throughout even in the Revolutionary War, he might have had strategic errors, but he had no leadership errors. People were willing to move forward in the worst of circumstances because of who he is. And for you to put that line in there that seems to have just manifested through his whole life, if there ends up being a sequel, for sure that'll continue to bear fruit. Can you talk about the moment of writing that line, and do you remember that being injected there?
Yes. Thank you for noticing that. Respect must be earned is ultimately what Lawrence says, right? And again, it's one of these things we always say that the story is always plausible and it's accurate where possible. And then we filled in a dramatic sense. We filled in the blanks, if you will, of his life, of his younger life, because there's a lot we don't know. When we were writing those passages, that relationship with his brother, it became extremely important. It became clear to us that once his father had passed away, his main role model for those formative years, early teenage years, was Lawrence, the brother who had served already, served the British, obviously, at the time. And George just wanted nothing more than to be like him. And so for Lawrence to then take that mentor role and that leadership role for his little brother was natural. What was also happening was that we know Washington started to study the classics, Cato and all the others, Plutarch. He knew his classics very well, and that was the education he got. Right, he was not able to go to school. His mother just couldn't imagine letting him go because he had to work on the farm. She needed all the help she could get. But in these classics, there are these eternal values, as you know. They're all there. We don't. When I look at education, my children go to a classical Christian school in Austin. It's called Regents, and they learn the classics aside from the Bible. And so, in my view, they get everything they need.
Yes.
And also, by the way, they learn to write with a pencil on paper. Thankfully, in the first few years, there's no screens whatsoever. But as they dive into these classics, I do it with them. Some of them I've never read before. we see that they, like George Washington, are just learning these eternal truths and values and the things that people have lived by for thousands of years. And here we are trying to reinvent the wheel in postmodern America, where the wheel's there. It's right there. And so as we were showing George, teaching himself or being taught by Lawrence these eternal lessons from the classics, but also from Lawrence's life experience, we thought it made a lot of sense to put those lines in there, but that early, because we then throughout the movie see him learn that lesson, if you will, that ultimately, I don't want to give it away, but as you know, having seen it, ultimately he knows that he needs to earn the respect of the men he's leading. Because if they don't respect him, they won't follow him. And if they don't follow him, he'll lose the battle. So that early realization, yes, sure, you can force humans like a dog, you can force obedience, but what you want is respect so that they will follow you. And I will only add that George learns too, I think, from the earliest stages into the battles that we show, he learns that he must be the first out of the gates. He must be the one to go into the field, to take the bullets if necessary, to draw fire so that his men can have a counterattack going on the other side. And that, again, that's where the respect truly is forged, right? Where the men look and realize what Washington is doing. He hasn't told them. He's just doing it. He survives miraculously, right? I think there was a divine hand over him. We can talk about that later.
Clearly.
But that earning of respect, not forcing obedience, but working at it in the right way, I think was an instrumental lesson that of course, you're right, he takes into 1776 and into his presidency as well.
And you kind of addressed it in the film a little bit too with providential. You kind of look at George Washington, you look at his life, you look at the bullet holes in his hat or in his, uniform. Can you touch on that as you were studying, as you were writing? Talk about, God's hand on George Washington, because I think it's been something we've been talking about a lot as we've looked at his life.
And now, what was his awareness of that, to the best you've research could reveal?
Yeah, well, from what we know, and I think the historians that John has been consulting, would agree, we don't know really about the role of his personal faith, his relationship to God, the Bible, Christ, in these early years. There just isn't much written or that survived. We do know that Mary, his mother, was a deeply devout Anglican woman. And so we know that she was talking about this, that she was going to church, that she was reading the Bible, that she would quote scripture to him. And so on the one hand, we decided to have Mary be that influence, talk about, she's at some point, now I'm paraphrasing myself because I can't remember the exact lines, but at some point she'll say, the military, soldiering would have not been my choice for you, but it might be God's path for you. And I love lines like that, where she makes him aware, like, hey, I'm your mother, but I am merely human. There might be a bigger plan. We might not fully see it. You probably can't see it yet, but if it is, it's God's plan, and you better stay with it. Stay on that path that he might be laying out for you. And then separately, we pick a few moments. We actually pick a couple of people, including Governor Dinwiddie, beautifully played by Ben Kingsley. And I should not forget to shout out William Franklin Miller, the young English actor portraying George Washington. In my view, so gifted and so talented, right? I'm glad to hear you agree. It's ironic that he's
a sternness in his face that you could. He portrayed uncertainty, where he should, because you can't be like this amazing.
I know what I'm doing when he didn't.
Got it when he didn't.
Yeah,
but you could see that seed of it in him evolve throughout the film. He grew as it was filmed. It was beautiful to see that, even the unsureness in his eyes come to clarity as the film progressed.
Love to hear it. So and that uncertainty, I'm glad you bring that up, because that, I think it means that both his mother's guidance and his brother Lawrence's, but also Governor Dinwiddie's, is that much more important. These relationships, we believe, are essential to who he became. And I think that's true for all of us, by the way, that we live in community, we live in relationship, and hopefully they're the right ones, the people who keep you on that right path. So we have Governor Dinwiddie, but ultimately also, again, I'm trying to be careful and not give it away if folks haven't seen the movie, but there is a Native American chief who observes and then voices this very powerful sentiment that there is a divine hand on George Washington, that there is clearly a destiny to his life, at that point, his very young life, because if there hadn't been, he would have died several times over on the battlefields. He didn't die. It's a miracle. And so this chief says, I'm going to remember your name. There is a destiny to you. And just for the record, that is true. That did happen. We have records of it. We just placed it. It's one of these examples where we took liberty and placed it much earlier in his life at the end of this movie, because it was a perfect observation to put it right there. We know that in reality, it was a little bit later. But so we try to be cautious and not suggest that George in his younger years was a devout Christian. We just don't really know, but we try to give him the context of sort of biblical truths of godly destiny through others speaking that into him.
Yeah, you definitely showed the soil that could have grown from, for sure. It was a very fertile environment for that beliefs that you do see in his writings when he's older. I was listening to Eric Metaxas recently wrote a book on the Revolution, and he made the point of saying there's one letter that Washington wrote to someone else, a friend, and within the verse, within the letter, there was 22 scripture references without saying, I'm quoting Deuteronomy here. It was just in his language. And so for that to flow out in the writing, it had to have been something that at some point he began to take. But again, you these early years, you got to kind of go on speculation, only seeing that it grew into this, thing that had to have started somewhere.
Yes. Well, and I will say that Ron Chernow, a brilliant biographer of Washington, also wrote this sentence that will always stay with me, that I'm not even sure if Chernow himself is religious. It doesn't really matter. But he describes that at the time, as Washington was coming of age and was starting to lead, he says, let me get this sentence right. There was a sense that God was grooming Washington for bigger things.
Yeah.
That was just sort of a general sense that people had, people who knew him, who worked with him, who saw him rise. And I love that. That is such a beautiful way of phrasing it. It might be a little esoteric, but it's real. Like it was something that everybody agreed on at the time.
Diederik, let me ask you a question. When you mentioned, Governor Dinwiddie, when I'm watching it, I almost hear myself saying, like, this is George Washington. You're lucky he's talking to you. Like, don't you know who this is? But at that stage of the story, it wasn't a finished project. It was, I love the Carl Sandburg series on Lincoln, and there's so many stories of Lincoln almost being, depression to the point of suicidal, during some of his years and heartbreak. And, I'm like, dude, your story hasn't even started yet. Like, you have this amazing life and you're kind of in the doldrums here over, this thing. So when I'm watching Washington, I'm thinking, oh man, like you have all this ahead, but all of us, we don't know what our futures have. We can do the next right thing to the best of our ability, combined with God, in that it was, as a takeaway for me, as you're watching this and knowing where his life goes, but you're sort of handcuffed to the reality of being young Washington. What were the biggest takeaways for you personally that you learned from research or putting it in the script that were like, man, that is a great life lesson. I want that, maybe more in my life. What's something that moved you that maybe you're a better man now because of that moment, that line, that story?
Great. Another great question. And when you think about Ben Kingsley in that role, sort of being a pretty tough boss, if you will, of the young George Washington, it's good to realize, I did not fully realize how British the colonies still were. If we're talking about the 1750s, obviously they were well established, but they were profoundly British. And George Washington wanted nothing more than to be like them, to be with them, to look like them, to sound like them, to go to England, to marry a girl from the British aristocracy in Virginia. Again, he couldn't get that girl, thankfully, because this history might have been different. But so that's one thing there. Like, even George Washington, the great Washington, thought he knew what he wanted at age, I don't know, let's say 16, right? Many of us might think we know who we are and what we need to be doing, what our path is going to be. How wrong was he? He was 16 years old. A few decades later, he leads the revolution and he becomes the president of an independent country. while he, as a kid, he just wanted to be like Governor Dinwiddie. He just wanted a royal commission in the British Army. So to say it's not in our hands, and we really, really don't know. I know the saying is God, we make plans and God laughs. And I think that's George Washington's life in these early years is a very good example. The other one that I would say a lesson for me personally, or something that resonated with me when we wrote, again, let me check here. No man who lived a life of ease no man who lived a life of ease ever left a name worth remembering. In other words, we might think that we want comfort and ease and quiet and just sort of a boring, calm life. And sometimes, of course, we do strive for that, especially as parents of young children. But in this movie, we make clear that a life worth remembering, whether that's being remembered by your kids or by the world, in George Washington's case, that it means discomfort. John Irwin wears a ring. I believe that Michael Iskander, who plays King David in the series, I believe Michael gave John a ring that says, "Seek discomfort," because it's one of John's mottos in life. And I think it just means getting out of your comfort zone, trying the thing you haven't done and that you might not be sure you can do. My wife and I talk about this all the time. She's building a startup company partially in Hollywood that's going up against Hollywood. I mean, it is extremely uncomfortable. And so she lives a life of discomfort, if you will. And I'm trying to teach my kids. Yesterday, we did a 4-mile hike in the mountains in Utah at 10,000 feet high. It is hard. My girls are 7 and 8. But I knew as Kelly said, you gave them new shoes and the confidence to do it. And that's what it took,
That's so good.
It's good for kids to know that they can do hard things because they don't know until they've done
hard things.
You don't have a vocabulary of past experiences to pull from if you've not gone through. Right. David killed the bear, killed the lion long before Goliath. He had those.
That's right.
I've done this and this. I don't know if I can do that, but I know I've done this and this. I've done hard things.
Well, I would say that Kelly, starting this company and what we've seen like with Young Washington coming out, you look at how successful it was compared to other things that they were expecting to do much better than they did. Hollywood was thinking it would do much better than it did. And I mean, Young Washington, you guys hit it out of the park. Can you talk about where you guys are right now with sales and how people can get more information on this movie and attend if they haven't seen it yet?
Yeah. If I can say this, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but at our little prayer before we went live, which was beautiful and moving, you said something like, "Let us continue to astound the establishment." Did I get that right?
Yes.
Beautifully said. I wanted to remember that because that's the goal here. Like, let's keep making movies and shows, and let's watch and support and celebrate movies and shows that celebrate the values that most of us believe in.
Yep.
Like it's not complicated. I mean, you hear Kelly make this pitch to investors or to Hollywood studios. It's not hard. Most of the audience is still where Disney was, let's say 30 years ago. Disney just went in a different direction, but the audience is still primarily where we believe we are.
Yes.
And so you are right that the predictions probably weren't great for this film as they have been for other Wonder Project, productions. And let's keep astounding them and surprising them. And let's keep showing up because this movie, I haven't checked the numbers in a couple of days, but I think we're at somewhere close to $40 million in the box office. And that's very promising. It was a great opening weekend where we beat the other big movies. I think George Washington is surpassing Supergirl. Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to see that movie personally, but so yeah, right. So I go back to where I started. You make a love letter to America, as John Irwin calls it. You tell a true story. You're not whitewashing it. You're not holding back. It was violent. It was difficult. You tell a great story, though. You celebrate a great man. People will come. And it doesn't have to be a great man. It can be a great woman. It can be a great family. It can be just a great story. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the lesson here. Like, tell these stories well. Don't compromise on quality. That's important. And thankfully, I'm very grateful to actors like Kelsey Grammer, who's in this movie, and Mary Louise Parker, and Andy Serkis. Terrific. They're all coming together around a story like this. They're not afraid to show up, to be a part of it, because when they do, that even gives it that extra imprimatur, if you will, to say this is high quality, great content.
Yes.
It is HBO quality content. It just couldn't be on HBO because it's not graphic, not gratuitously graphic, but it is enjoyable, and it's true. That's what we think is working, and will keep working. Hopefully, we are waking up and astounding Hollywood, as in, if we make it, they will come. So the Wonder Project really doesn't want to be the only one, and I know that's true for Angel as well. Let everybody, it's a lot of there's a lot of room in the boat here. Let's all do it together. That's the purpose and the goal.
Want to make sure people know where to go. This show is going on 60 different platforms. So wherever you're listening to this, in the notes below, if you're on Spotify, you're on Apple, you're on Rumble, wherever the case may be. If you go to the show notes below, we'll have the links, but you can go to youngwashington.com, and they got a leaderboard on there. They got ways to find theaters where it's near you. We loved this so much. They put up a little QR code at the end that you can pay this forward and have other people see it. I mean, I just want people in the room. That's why I was banging the table so hard to get you on the show. I love this film. I want people to see it. I want to make it very visible. It's easy, when we're in a world of distractions and people kind of bounce to the next thing in the World Cup or this or that. So there's people that have been thinking about seeing this and they've not. This is one you could take your grandparents, you can take your kids, you can go to a matinee and then go to lunch afterwards and talk about it and talk about the lines that were takeaways for you. This is a galvanizing family building kind of thing. Co-workers. We went with two of our friends we play pickleball with. It's just like a fun conversation, a great place to go. Youngwashington.com. Colton, what's the other link as well in the Angel?
Yep. If
you
go to angel.com, you can find the movie on here as well, and it just has other things on here. You can sign up for updates, but that's also where you can pay it forward. So if someone's on here and they're like, man, I watched it, but I want to make sure other people can have access to this movie as well, they can pay it forward. And I would like to say, you guys are really close to the milestone goal here. We're 96% of the milestone goal. So if everyone on this show that's currently watching this show goes on and buys one movie ticket, we'll knock it over that milestone.
Yes.
So let's get that done.
Come on. We need to do it. And if you're watching this right now and you've ever complained about all the junk coming out of Hollywood, they don't make any good movies anymore, blah, 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 and you kind of get into your kind of Archie Bunker funk, you know what? Like, if you've ever said one sentence like that, then you are obligated to buy tickets to this movie because it is the antidote to what you complain about. And so there's no validity to your complaint when you don't show up, when there's something that is pro-America, just pro-goodness, good stories. The story of Washington would be good in any era. It's equally relevant right now, but you got to go out and support it because that's how these things continue, because it does send a message to a world that doesn't care about your beliefs or what you think, but they do look at, wow, that sells. Look at Taylor Sheridan. They're like, oh, well, and he's not even particularly, conservative, whatever. He's just like a normal writer, writes about normal people and does it in a great way, but it moves the needle and people want to tune in, so they make more of it. So I got to end you with one last question. I know we're kind of over our time that you agreed to, but a sequel.
No problem.
We ended it saying we want more.
Yep.
Give us a little crumb. What's coming next, if anything?
Yeah, thank goodness John Irwin is obsessed with the founding era. So he's already announced that 1776 is the next movie.
Yes.
Its title speaks for itself, and so George Washington, we get to know him. We understand him better at the end of this movie. And then we want to take it a few decades forward and then meet this sort of the band of brothers, if you will, this very wildly diverse and interesting group of young guys trying to come up with a country.
Yes.
It's a pretty cool story. And so I think John and I are talking. It's in the works. I can't say too much or promise anything at the moment, but I know it's coming. And so we ask for a little bit of patience. I just want to say, guys, I wish we could talk forever. This has been a great conversation, and I'm so grateful on behalf of everybody at Wonder Project for the support that you and everyone going to the movies are giving us. Let's celebrate great content, great American content. Like you said, it's for the family, it's for your friends, it's for everyone. That was the intent.
Diederik, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. You heard the music. You know what time it is. It's time for an economic update with Dr. Kirk Elliott. Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Thank you. So in this time of crypto and everything that we see going on in the world, what is going on with our economy?
So crypto is interesting, right? And really why people go into crypto is the same reason why people go into physical gold and silver. I mean, fundamentally, they're the same. Why? Number one, they want growth. Okay, you get that with both metals and with crypto, potentially, right? Safety. You know, decentralized blockchain, like Bitcoin or XRP or Solana or Ethereum, right? It's outside of the system. Right. Okay, that's what gold and silver offer as well. So it's both safety and growth and privacy outside of the system. Right. So let's look at Bitcoin for a second. Right. Okay. I mean, okay, so everyone, we're going to talk a lot about crypto today. Right. So Michael Saylor with Strategy, he's the largest, company holder treasury of Bitcoin on earth.
Wow.
Right. So why is he so up in arms with a recent decision? Well, because your true Bitcoiners, they said, what is Bitcoin? It's an alternative currency. That's what it is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a currency on the blockchain. Well, some of the other crypto companies like Ethereum took a strategy of Bitcoin. It's like, okay, let's put something on the blockchain, but let's make it smart. Right, let's make it do something that is not just a replacement currency. Let's give it the ability to write smart contracts on it so you can tokenize it, so you can attach real world assets to it. You could put mortgage contracts on there. You can put oil. You can put securities. You can do all of that. That's where Ethereum came in, right? Which is the ability to use a blockchain technology and attach smart contracts to it. Right, so Bitcoin never was that. So now there's this ruling. It's not necessarily a ruling, right? It's called BIP 110, which Saylor's all up in arms about, because really what it does is it changes the consensus of the Bitcoin blockchain. It used to need 95% consensus of all the miners to make a change to 55%. You said, wait a second, this is not necessarily good. Well, what is it that they're wanting to do? They're wanting to make Bitcoin something more than what Bitcoin was intentionally meant to do, which was be a replacement currency, and the ability to possibly have smart contracts on the Bitcoin rails.
Okay.
Right. So you're seeing this opposition of purist Bitcoiners to cryptocurrency people, right? Let's kind of separate that, and wanting to make Bitcoin something different. What's this going to do to Bitcoin? It's going to cause people to say, well, wait a second. I've got my Bitcoin. It was a replacement currency, but if I wanted smart contracts, I would have invested in something else anyways. I would have invested in Solana or Ethereum or XRP, something that has utility already that provides a purpose other than replacement currency. So I think this is going to put a fracturing in the demand for Bitcoin as people are going to start shifting, right? So why does this matter? Because Bitcoin is the king of the cryptocurrency world, and a lot of times cryptos rise and fall with what Bitcoin does, right? So here we're starting to see fractures in these different asset categories, right? We've already talked about in past shows fracturing that's happening in the bond market. I think it's ripe for a collapse because of rising yields across the globe. That caused the price of bonds to come down. That will have a secondary effect on the equity markets, right? As will an AI bubble bursting, right? And so, but you still had this crypto, and now you're going to see, this is probably why some people are saying, well, Bitcoin still has a lot of correction to do. It could go down to 30 to 40,000 from where it's at today. I mean, it was over 100 beginning of the year. I mean, it's had a massive free fall, but I still think because of some of these things happening, it's going to be more. Now, it's important in the crypto space that a world is established that's non-central bank digital currency, like we talked about on the last show. CBDC is centralized. All other blockchain is decentralized, right? Which means you're ultimately in control. You own your tokens, right? So, and you have ultimate control over it. Well, as crypto rises and falls with demand and perception, right? I think this Bitcoin story is important on what is going to be the utility of it. But if we make a little shift here to central bank digital currency, how close are we? Like literally, why is it important that these decentralized rails get established way more quickly and robustly? Because CBDC is upon us. So the Bank of Korea over the weekend, they prepare for live CBDC transactions with 9 major banks in September.
Wow.
Right. Okay. So that's a big country with 9 big counterparties saying, yeah, we'll start to settle. We'll start to get the CBDC thing rocking and rolling like now. Well, are they the only ones? No, they're not. There's 41 countries that are now testing CBDC for deployment. 33 more have one in development. And now, what did Trump do? The Trump or the U.S. Senate passed a bill that included a 4-year ban on CBDCs in America, right? But does that mean that international banks operating in America aren't going to be participating in that? I don't know, right? There's some things that we just don't know. But here's where globally, if international settlements are going to be done on some of these blockchain rails in CBDC, what is that going to mean for America, even though Trump outlawed CBDC? We don't know what the implications are, except that we are marching headlong at full speed ahead into a command and control world of digital currency that a lot of us and your viewers aren't going to want, right? No. So there's some things now that are being spread amongst the internet and podcasts and things like that. It's like, well, quantum computing is going to be able to crack the Bitcoin code, right? It's going to crack the algorithm and be able to steal all your Bitcoin. Probably true. Probably true for any cryptocurrency or digital asset or security or bank account that's digital. Quantum computing, but it's not here right now. It's not here yet, right? But probably by, estimates are past 2030, this is going to be a thing. So there's a couple of privacy-oriented tokens like Monero, Zcash, that are basically already quantum computing proof. They basically inoculated themselves against that. I don't know any of the technical jargon of how they did it or how, right? But there's a couple are now. By the time quantum computing is a legitimate, more mainstream thing, it's not just going to be 2. It's probably going to be almost all of them that are going to be safe from that, right? Which is why don't buckle into the fear of quantum computing is going to steal everything that you have, because I think there's going to be options moving forward. But this is the exciting part about the development of the decentralized blockchain networks as a counterparty, getting rid of the scariness of central bank digital currency, right? But here's where gold, this whole storyline and narrative is so bullish for gold and silver, huge, because a lot of the collateralization that's going to happen on the decentralized blockchain is going to be revolving around collateral, what's real, what's not, and privacy. I think the privacy thing they're going to be able to figure out. The collateral thing, it's kind of up to us. It's kind of up to the central banks. And they're already telling us what they're going into. They're going into gold. So I say all of this to say, expect volatility in the crypto markets. Expect volatility in the bond markets as some of these things are playing themselves out. And the largest player in the Bitcoin universe is saying, I don't really like where some of this stuff is headed. So I say all of that to say those kind of messages from the big dog in the Bitcoin universe are going to start fracturing that, right? And to me, it's like, okay, I don't really care about volatility, because when we understand where the world is headed and what's going to be important down the road, we can allocate into that now. And this volatility actually helps us because it keeps prices. Some of you are going to hate this statement and some of you are going to love it. It's going to keep prices volatile, moving sideways for a bit, but ultimately when it pops out of this consolidation, I think it goes up, and it goes up rapidly and a lot, right? So use this as an opportunity to allocate at these lower prices and start to use biblical wisdom and understanding how these dynamics of these different asset classes start to, not dictate. You're the only one that dictates what you do, but how you should do it and why, right? So I think that there is going to be fracturing in a lot of these markets. So don't let it bother you. Just do something about it, right? And this is where I love physical gold and silver. Even though we've gone through some sideways action, it won't stay here forever, but allocate into that strength the same way that central banks are, in its physical form. And in the end, I think that's going to be your protection from all of this noise.
Well, the word that keeps coming to my mind is like sovereignty. When I have something physical, nobody's going to hack this. And I can back this, with whatever, comes in the future. And this window of time here, because I think everything is going to accelerate that's real. The dollar is probably going to struggle. Physical gold, physical silver. I think oil is going to continue being a thing where they've done as much green stuff as they can, but our world is still run by oil. They may digitize the value of crops and how we trade, exchange. All of these things are going to change in ways that you probably could have never envisioned 30 years ago, when you began in this space. And as you got your PhDs and understanding the inflation rates and the values of what they put in shopping carts and how they factor inflation and the way numbers are manipulated, like you've understood the thing behind the thing for decades. Now, could you have understood, Michael Saylor and cryptocurrency and the digital, like all those things are, you never know what's going to come. But when you're based it on something that's real, you're always going to weather these storms well. And that's why I like the position that we're in. The crazier things get, the more this swings, the more important it is to be standing on rock, to have something that's real that you can leverage against. And a lot of our listeners, are piecemealing this thing week in, week out, month in, month out with, say, $500 or $1,000 or pieces at a time, and building a war chest that whatever happens, they're in the best possible negotiating position, to maintain their own sovereignty as these things accelerate. So
that's exactly right.
So Flyover family, you can go to flyovergold.com, flyovergold.com anytime, day or night. All you got to do is put in your name, address, or your email, and they'll reach out to you and have a conversation. What are your options? What's your age? What's your situation? What are you with retirement? Do you have an IRA? Do you have cash? What is your position? What are your goals? And how do you begin developing a framework, not in a day, but month in, month out, where you're building a framework that'll help you withstand whatever changes come. This is what Dr. Kirk and his team are designed to do, not a transaction, how to be able to walk you through this a year from now, 2 years from now. We talked about 2030, what's happening then with quantum computing, all of these things. This is a team that'll be there to continue walking you through this process. So you don't have to be in fear. You just have a phone call. So flyovergold.com. Enter your phone number, enter your email. They'll reach out to you and have this conversation to see what's best for you. You can pray about that, and then download a free copy of this book, Thriving in the Economic Tsunami. It tends to age really well. The crazier things get, the wisdom that's in this book. So, Dr. Kirk, we thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you do in private. You're always looking at the charts. You're always looking at the things that make the charts and understanding what is happening in a rapidly changing world. That, again, as you're talking today, I was kind of thinking like, man, when we first met you in the early 90s, there's no way you could have predicted where this world was going. But I tell you what, there's nothing better to have built your house on than something real over this course of time.
No doubt about it.
For sure.
Thank you again for your time, Dr. Kirk. We really appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Flyover Conservatives podcast with David and Stacy Whited. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave us a comment below. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's podcast, share with those who came to mind. Be blessed and make it a great day.